Greetings all, and welcome to the 7th segment of a Traveler's Guide 2 for the B.S.L Research Station. And today, we'll be continuing with a look at the vessel with our next segment, a Traveler's Guide to Sector 6 NOC and the Restricted Zone. Sector 6 was a unique sector designed to stimulate nocturnal and cave life for many different species of subterranean lifeforms from various planets. Unlike the other sectors, light was limited here, as the entire area had to be kept dark to properly simulate cave life and the night, along with the rocky, mainly plant-free ground and walls. It was here that the hunter first came into contact with mutated blue X parasites, which actually would hurt her if she absorbed them as a result of her initial weakness to cold. She attempted to try and use a data room to download data for a various suit patch, but the data was stolen by her Core X and then subsequently mutated into the Mega Core X, as it was unable to really make the most of the upgrade, and thus just turned into a giant swollen version of itself. This made it easy pickings for the hunter to kill and absorb in order to recover her variosuit and in turn protection from extreme heat and cold. Later on, she was sent to explore the area to destroy the infected BOX security robot, and in doing so, she was able to kill the Core X that integrated itself into the machine and earned her wave beam back, which she was then able to use to open shutters leading into the most forbidden of places on the station, the Restricted Zone. The Restricted Zone was accessible only to those with the highest possible security clearances, and even then, the insides of the facility were locked from the inside to ensure that the hunter didn't go snooping around where she wasn't supposed to, not anticipating the destruction of a Core X would be enough to restore her wall-penetrating wave beam back into her beam weapon systems. Inside, the hunter discovered that the Restricted Zone, and more specifically the restricted laboratory contained within it, was being used as a testing ground for the breeding of Metroids. The inclusion of Sector 1 was done on purpose in order to produce a simulated container where the Metroids grown in the Restricted Zone could naturally grow and develop into adults, producing behemoths like Omega and even Queen Metroids if they wanted to. It may not have been strictly for bioweapon purposes anymore, but the conspiracy was all about mass-producing them and using Sector 1's atmosphere as a catalyst for mutation. As angry as the hunter was at this revelation, and as much as it severed the last ties of respect she had for the Galactic Federation, it was not her actions that ultimately caused the destruction of this area. As she had been told by Adam upon entering Sector 6, she was being pursued by an SAX, and that same SAX entered the Restricted Zone and went nuts, breaking numerous infant Metroids out of their stasis chambers and trying to kill them with the ice beam, but to no avail. There were simply too many of them to handle at once, and the monster was overwhelmed. The attack triggered an emergency failsafe in the lab that had forced it to detach and self-destruct within a minute, and while the hunter might have never had a chance to get out normally, the infant Metroids distracted the SAX long enough for her to get out of the restricted laboratory and into Sector 1 again, watching as the Restricted Zone detached from the rest of the station and exploded. Before we take a good look at the unique biota of this area, it's important to note that, as far as previously covered organisms go, this area was home to the Ghidorah. With that out of the way, let's start our examination of the unique beasts that can be found in this dark, cavernous habitat. The Menu was a bat-like insectoid known for its nocturnal nature and habit of living within dark environments exclusively. These small creatures had a single pair of small claws that they used to grasp the tops of cave ceilings and grab plant life that grew in the walls of said areas, which serves their primary source of sustenance, as well as a single pair of small wings that they used for flight. The most notable feature of the creature, however, was its large central eye, which allowed it to see quite clearly in dark caverns. This could be a problem when near the surface in the daytime, however, as the eye of this beast was so sensitive to light that direct exposure to sunlight could easily blind it, rendering it unable to see where it was going. These beasts did not have any form of sonar to help them move around, so they had to remain in dark areas completely in order to eke out any sort of living. Interestingly enough, there is some speculation that these entities may have been cyborgs, as their plated skin and wings seem to be artificial in origin, as did their bizarre ability to pass through solid walls and floors. But the mystery of the biological state of these weak creatures will probably never be solved, as they went completely extinct with the destruction of Zebes, and their presence as blackened copies on the B.S.L research station did not provide any further useful information. Still, as they once were, these creatures could not really cause any significant harm to others outside of attacking with their claws, and weren't that resilient, landing them squarely within threat level Alpha. Bulls were an exotic form of plant life that resembled the members of the puffer family to a great degree, but they were thankfully nowhere near as potentially dangerous in the natural state. These plant creatures generated gases like methane and helium in order to keep themselves afloat in the air, but unlike the puffer and its relatives, their outer skin was actually very thick and could require heavy-duty firepower in order to break. Similar to the puffer, the bull possessed a series of tube-like ports around its body that are used in order to regulate the amount of light gas contained within its form at any time, allowing it to move up and down the air without having to exert much in the way of effort. However, the ports also served a secondary purpose that was much more important: food gathering. In the absence of sunlight, Bulls had taken using their tubular body form to suck in small organisms floating in the air or under the water, with a complex series of filtering structures existing in their interior body cavity that could quickly release a poison into their prey that killed them instantly, thus allowing the plant to then rip the prey apart and reduce it to a state that the inside of its walled body could then absorb. Despite the fragility of these internal structures, however, the bull was actually quite aggressive and would actively attempt to ram its hardened body into potential threats the moment they vacuumed air into their bodies and was extremely rich in biological material. This power was not enough in the eyes of some, however, as the green-colored bulls were taken by the Galactic Federation on the bottle ship and converted into bioweapons by manipulating their genes to overexpress the piece of their genetic code that regulated how much toxin they produced to kill minor prey, ultimately turning them a blue color with purple tubes that could actually spit poison gas and genetically programming them to ram targets solely to detonate their bodies in a toxic burst, just like the puffer and its relatives. Though this consequently weakened their skin and made them much more vulnerable to direct damage from all weapon types. The Galactic Federation were not alone in their thoughts though, as bulls were among the many creatures killed and copied by X-parasites on the B.S.L research station, and the parasites apparently found the monster's bioengineered form so deadly that they chose to change nothing in copying them, leaving them with the same weakened form as observed on the bottle ship. This could make them a pain for me to deal with if their thick hides cannot otherwise be readily penetrated, and given the noxious nature of their feeding cycle, it easily makes them fit for threat level beta, and best avoided if at all possible. The Zozoro was the larval form of an unknown insectoid that was never able to mature in captivity before being killed and copied by the X-parasites aboard the B.S.L research station, and as a result, all copies of the creature were stuck in a larval stage. They resembled Zeros remarkably in terms of the overall body form and shape, but they were readily differentiated by the thin stringy appendage that was attached to the front part of their body. This organic material was actually an extrasensory appendage that allowed them to detect the smell of mosses and fungi in the air, which served as their primary source of sustenance. Because of this, as well as the fact that they were technically blind, these creatures were stored in the dark of Sector 6 on the B.S.L research station and seemed to have adjusted to the environment very well, seeing as the X-parasite copies are found in many areas of this sector. The Zozoro was highly adept at climbing structures, as it possessed a series of suction cup-like structures on their feet that allowed them to stick to walls and ceilings with little trouble. But it is known that if they were hit with any sort of attack, the Zozoro would release its grip immediately and start to move at an accelerated pace in the opposite direction, making it relatively easy to remove them from their current position. The Zozoro were essentially harmless for the most part, and were only capable of dealing contact damage at their worst, making them more of an annoyance than a real threat, and only mere fodder in comparison to some of the other creatures that made the living inside the shadow of Sector 6, thus landing them in threat level Alpha. While the hunter was exploring Sector 6 for the first time under the lead of Adam to find the data room in the sector to download the various suit data from, as the area had become infested with blue X parasites from Sector 5, she would find herself in a rough situation, for when she came to the data room, she found a great shock that a Core X had plugged itself into the download station and absorbed the data she was supposed to receive for the very suit, destroying the data room in the process and floating off into the next room. When she pursued the creature into the adjacent room, she witnessed the monster mutate into, well, not such a successful interpretation of data. Seemingly because the data they had downloaded was not for weapon system of any sort, the creature did not understand what to do with it and simply morphed into the Mega Core X, a freakish-looking version of itself with a much larger green body coated with a webbing of bulging yellow veins and a series of smaller Core X replicas hovering around it. This monster could not really do much more than try and ram into the hunter, and while this transformation seemingly removed its vulnerability to missiles, it also rendered its tissue soft and vulnerable to attack from charged beam shots. While a single shot could be used to destroy any of the small units floating around it, only direct hits caused the monster to take damage and slowly fade in color until it was forced to revert to its normal Core X state, giving the hunter the chance to finish it off and absorb the Core X to restore the attributes of the various suit to her systems once more. This was clearly an early attempt of the creature to try and convert data into something more weaponized, and it really didn't do much to leave a terrifying impression, so at most, it can really only be assigned to threat level beta.
So, what the heck am I even looking at here, huh? Looks like someone trying to turn a giant beach ball into a weapon and failed at a massive bloody level. This thing was just weird, and it really shows the faults the X had in trying to adapt to non-organic data to their forms initially. Poor choice, poor execution. I don't know what a monster with various suit parts would actually look like, but it sure as hell wouldn't have been this thing. This was just lazy and really dumb. I guess it's kinda cool that only charged energy shells could actually diffuse past its outer membrane to damage it, but that's all it really had going for it, so yeah. Follow this one on the reject table, cause it's clear that this X-parasite had no bloody idea what it was doing.
Late into her mission aboard the B.S.L research station, the Hunter was alerted by Adam that the BOX security robot's organic neural network, which she had exposed in her first fight with the machine, had been infected by X-parasites, and it was now necessary to quickly make her way through Sector 6 and terminate the machine before the SCX followed her into the sector. While the Hunter was unable to find the robot on her own, when she accidentally came into contact with the security door to the restricted zone and an alarm sounded, it attracted the attention of the infected machine until she managed to find it in a water-filled chamber. While she had to detonate explosives to reveal a set of rungs hidden in the ceiling of this new cavern, the ceiling was also much lower and thus made it much easier for the robot to leap up and knock her down, which was a real problem because the water in the bottom of the chamber had been electrified by the robot's presence and would thus hurt the Hunter if she fell into it. Instead of grenades, the BOX security robot had converted systems to fire a quartet of missiles at her, and although they were decently powerful, they could also be easily destroyed from beam weapon shots. After firing away at the machine's exposed neural circuitry for some time, the robot finally broke down and the main brain inside of it detached itself from its hull and floated up and out of the body as it exploded, reverting into a beam Core X. In destroying this monster, the Hunter was able to reacquire the power and attributes of her wave beam, which in turn allowed her to activate the locked door she had come across earlier and grant her access to the restricted zone. While it had been rendered a much more powerful and dangerous entity as a result of the X-parasite infection that had taken its life, so to speak, and could use a more reliable weapon system to defend itself, this iteration of the B.S.L station's primary security robot followed the same general attack patterns and thus could be dealt with in the same manner as before, though the presence of a beam carrying Core X still gave it an edge in at least some fashion, deserving of a place within threat level Delta.
Yeah, the worst case scenario is right here in front of you. The result of the semi-organic parts of his body being corrupted and then taken control of by the X. This just happens whenever something isn't entirely mechanical in nature, and since that rarely goes well for massive threats, this is the sort of thing that you would just honestly expect to happen no matter what. That being said though, I also find it a bit funny that, in becoming a host for the X, his entire primary weapon system was replaced with missiles. It's funny because the first encounter with the machine before it was possessed happened after the Hunter acquired the power of super missiles again. Makes me wonder if there's a connection there or not. Regardless though, this entity has the same weakness from before and could thus still be exploited, but it didn't make it easy for the Hunter. Honestly, this makes me really want to take a crack at studying and learning more about semi-organic entities and machines. Might finally give me something to talk about with Sciency, instead of arguing over lab space all the time.
Sector 6 along with the restricted zone were both unique locations in that the former was mainly known for the dark being a threat in it that would make it hard to see any nearby creatures that could have been dangerous, and the latter for its lack of natural enemies, but a heaping ton of Metroids in storage that could be unleashed at seemingly any moment. The former, though potentially dangerous to traverse unarmed, didn't exactly have much in the way of vicious natural biota to speak of, and thus could be easy to get around so long as you stayed away from the noxious gases emitted by entities like the Bull. The latter, on the other hand, was only of real danger to anyone foolish enough to release said Metroids from the storage containers, and given that led to the zone's total destruction, yeah, not much more to say on that. As such, travelers really would only need decent firepower and a strong flashlight if they really wished to explore Sector 6, as well as respiratory aids or some other sort of filtration breathing equipment to get by the dust and gas that otherwise filled the dark and dank atmosphere of the sector. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are finally done with our analysis of the B.S.L research station. What happened at this facility is genuinely a tragedy, and one that will hopefully never come to pass again for those that wish to look into the lore and biota of the many worlds that have been left untouched by the X-parasite. Now, that's not to say that we are actually done with the X-parasites themselves, as there is another world that was ultimately destroyed because of them, aside from SR-388. However, before we can get to that, something has come up on our radar that we didn't expect, and the window to react is short. So we'll have to put a pause there and take a visit over to a Federation planet called Tanamar, as there is something very special there just waiting for a full investigation. Thank you all for watching this video. We here at Space Pirate Science Team take our work very seriously, and we genuinely wish to be as informative as possible when it comes to the work we conduct here, for both ourselves and in the name of science. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment to help us get greater recognition out there to inform the greater populace of the universe as a whole. Also, feel free to keep track of us through Twitter, as we'll be posting notices there every time something new is submitted for your viewing pleasure. We hope to see you all in the next video, no matter what world it may take us to.